Hey Douglas, how are you, man?
I am morning Friday potting.
You're mourning the week?
I'm in the morning potting.
You're fry potting.
Bader and the D-Man return.
One more time.
Probably every
Last.
Friday because we suck at scheduling.
Yeah, I think Friday's just going to be the new Thursday
Yeah. Never really liked
because
Thursday.
yeah, and then people can listen to it on Saturday or pretend to listen. I don't
Oh,
care.
just
Just
ease right into that weekend with a
listen to our
frothy pod.
voices
Yeah. You
in the
know?
morning. Wake up on Saturday morning. Just listen to Bader and the D-Man
Yeah. In the market, getting bagels, having brunch. What are you gonna do? Brunch and pod? Brunch and pod.
with your new headphones. I admit that I bought a pair of headphones yesterday.
Really? Because you
Um,
needed more headphones? I think
I
I'm
needed
wearing
more
your
headphones.
headphones.
You're wearing my headphones. So I needed in-ear headphones. Um, and this is them. It's the Sony XBA H1. It's the Wirecutter's pick for the best in-ear headphone. There's no there's no English on the back of this box, which is
Cool.
amazing. It's direct from Japan. So we'll see. I'm going to put those through its paces. I just reviewed a pair of headphones actually. The RHA T10i. If you haven't checked out that review, look at it. I actually I love the headphones more for their look than their sound. Their sound is like it's super bassy. Like this is a British company that's recently come to Canada, and it's they're like $225, I think, but
Mm.
they're probably only worth about 150. But
You're
they're
not all about that
beautiful.
bass? You don't like the bassy?
It's too much. It's like uncontrollable. It's one of those things where because they're in your monitor, so you're supposed to get a seal in your ears.
Mm-hmm.
They make your jaw rattle
Oh,
because it's like one of those headphones that it puts like it pulls in so much low frequency and it puts it right into your brain and
yeah, that's
with a
not good.
deep
That's not good for your brain, kids.
I was testing it with a bunch of hip hop, and I was listening to Kendrick Lamar's new album, and it's like when that bass is going off, you can't do anything else. You
I'd,
have to
I'd be
turn.
more concerned about all that EDM those kids are listening to these days. Like, like actually, break your jaw off. Don't
Yeah.
do
Well,
bass, kids. Don't do that.
I don't think a lot of kids are listening to in-ear monitors. They're probably listening to over the ear headphones, like the Beats,
Tweaked out on something.
and the 50s. What is 50 Cent's headphone company called?
Mm,
I
I
look that
I
up
don't
right
know. Is it
now.
is it tied in with the water company that he owns?
He owns a water company?
Like vitamin water?
Oh no, I think he just invested in vitamin. Doesn't Coke own vitamin water? Yeah,
Uh,
his are called SMS Audio. So anyway, that's our. We always divert from
yeah,
what we're intending to talk
that's
about.
our
So
headphone podcast.
we'll have a headphone. Why not? We'll have a headphone podcast. So what's up, man? How's your week been?
Pretty good. There's some big news in the Canadian tech space. Non-mobile company
Yeah,
called
tell us.
Shopify has filed its intentions for an IPO, initial public offering, and that is a big deal because Canadian companies don't often do that. They usually try to get acquired or do not succeed. So the community's kind of been paying swift attention to that. Also, we've been working with Bruce Croxon and BNN on a little TV show called The Disruptors, which happened to air last night,
Breaking. That's
Thursday night.
amazing. I love
Yeah.
it.
So you'll see a little bit of the beta kit on there with the research and the startups and the
Yeah.
things
So
like that.
how is BetaKit like involved in that?
So we are kind of like the crack team for imbuing it with we're the crack team. We do the crack things. So any of the research, any of the background, helping prioritize guests, doing research on interviews and things like that, just helping make sure that the context and the insight around these conversations, because a show like BNN has to appeal or reach or speak to a broad audience. So we make sure that the startup stuff is accurate and kind of on point. So Bruce and Amber can just do their thing.
That's cool.
Yeah, you also might see us like on panels participating as guests in the future.
No kidding. Well, bookmark that. That's awesome. I really enjoy that. I think you guys have been doing a really great job on BetaKit. And so tell me a little bit about Shopify, because I know a lot of our listeners probably have heard of them, but
I would think a lot of them have
used
Shopify without even knowing it, right? Much in the same way that they could use WordPress every day without even knowing it. So Shopify, I guess, essentially is an e-commerce platform that kind of it WordPresses out or YouTubes. It democratizes anyone's ability to build and get an e-commerce site up. So it's not a complicated process. It's something like anyone can do, kind of like a Squarespace for websites kind of thing. And that has worked very, very well for Shopify.
Cool. So basically, they provide like e-commerce solutions for small businesses, but they have also gotten, from what I understand, they also have like a physical retail POS space, right? Like they offer in-store iPad, and is it basically like a Square competitor?
Yeah, so I think you had been tracking some of that really interesting like Frank and Oak kind of integration, and this is this convergence point where, and I think Amazon actually just shut down their Shopify competitor. It's like everyone is trying to converge all the different e-commerce plays. So that includes like the in-store point of sale stuff with the back-end platforms, because the more of those touch points that you can kind of own, just the easier it is for the retailer, no matter who they are. And I think the Frank and Oak article that was done kind of pointed to the idea that even something that came pure digital is kind of moving to store experiences. We talked about that with the Future Shop Best Buy stuff. So everyone's trying to have like a portfolio kind of gamut of all the ways that people can spend money for things.
Right.
And kind of Shopify kind of started with like the templated store kind of things. Like you can buy store themes and all this stuff. That it works for, one person business up to larger companies.
That's awesome.
So it's a big deal. There's going to be more money in the Canadian tech space. They could be the new BlackBerry.
I think that's really the takeaway here, though, is that it is just a success story on so many levels, right?
Yeah.
You don't hear. I mean, Etsy just IPO'd this week, right? And they shot up by like 500% or 300% or something from their list price. I don't know what it is now, but
it's just raining dollars is what it is. Like the stock ticker is just dollar sign.
Slack, another former sort of Canadian. I mean, it's not a Canadian company. They're based out in San
Canadian
Francisco.
Company, Vancouver. We claim them.
Okay, I mean, fair enough. I think that's fair. But they're
it's like Superman in basketball. Those are totally Canadian.
Superman playing basketball is just the most Canadian thing you can think of, right?
There will be a new Canadian heritage moment about Slack, I swear to God.
Speaking of Superman, did you see the leaked trailer for Batman versus Superman?
Leaked? I did not know. I saw the new Star Wars trailer. I did not see the Batman Superman.
Okay, so anybody listening who hasn't seen that yet, I'm sure it'll come out this weekend or tomorrow, but somebody filmed, it was a Spanish-speaking theater or movie, so it was subtitled, but somebody filmed it on his or her cell phone and released it to the internet. So check that out because it's awesome.
We're so off. I think we know our demographic pretty well. We're talking about e-commerce and headphones and Batman and Superman. That's in the mobile syrup kind of like oeuvre of interests.
Of course it is. We should then spend the next hour talking about the Star Wars trailer because why not? Or teaser. Sorry, teaser.
Yeah.
So Etsy also IPO'd. They're now at $30.
Just a bajillion. Just money. It doesn't even matter.
They've doubled. So they IPO'd at $16 and now they're $30, which is amazing. So good for them. I mean, that's another success story, and Shopify seems to be on the route to being one of Canada's biggest companies.
Yeah. So the important thing here for, where this is like to give it to the mobile store peeps is like the people that will get sweet golden hats of money from having worked at or invested in Shopify will create a whole new swath of kind of investment in Canadian tech that will lead to so many new companies popping up and building things in a way that maybe BlackBerry's ascension didn't quite happen until after kind of BlackBerry went under, and all these people from BlackBerry have now gone on. Because when BlackBerry kind of like popped, you didn't see a lot of people leaving BlackBerry to start a new mobile company, like not comparative to say some of the other major global tech companies. A lot of that stuff didn't happen until like post 2009 with BlackBerry's troubles, right? So the chance here is for like a Shopify Mafia of investors to just create a whole new slew of companies in both Ottawa, Toronto, Kitchener-Waterloo, all throughout Canada.
And I mean, it's interesting you say the word mafia, and I know that's being flippant, but there's actually there's precedent to that. There is something called a Skype mafia, which based on the success of Skype and the selling of that to eBay. And
no, you're talking about the PayPal mafia.
No, Skype. Sorry, the Skype mafia is the runoff from the PayPal mafia, right?
There's a few mafias.
There are several, but from what I understand, the former leaders, the former founders of Skype, once they sold, I'm looking right now because everybody's heard of the PayPal mafia, but there's actually a Skype mafia too. Anyway, so there's a bunch of people who have invested in these or who have created these little messaging startups on the back of Skype, and I think you know, this is a sort of trend, is that you get these success stories and they beget more success stories because there's interest and there's investment and then there's excitement.
Yeah, and the people who get the money in these scenarios are the kind of tech founder builder people who kind of want to pay back to people who are like them or would, you know, want to start a new thing. So yeah, it's good. It's good for the Canadian economy.
What else is good for the Canadian economy, Douglas? How about the LG G4? No, that was a terrible transition.
No, I liked it. I think, well, I guess it's good for the Canadian economy to know what the phone will be and look like prior to being like available for purchase or even announced.
Yeah. So basically, let's transition here quite abruptly.
Yeah.
So and now this is the beginning of our show. So 13 minutes in, this is the beginning of our show notes.
I love that you announced it. And we're starting.
LG G4 got leaked. So we haven't potted for about 10 days. And somewhere in there, the microsite for the LG G4 got pushed out accidentally. And the problem was that it was using a bunch of placeholders for the G3. So the G4 itself was leaked, but the specs were not. So we know a few things. We know that it's going to have a 5.5-inch QHD display like the G3, but it'll be of much higher quality. It'll have a 16-megapixel sensor created by LG with an f1.8 lens, which is actually sharper and faster than the Galaxy S6, which has an amazing camera. We think that it's going to have a Snapdragon 808 chip, which is a downgrade from the A10. But there have been so many issues with the A10, and that's Qualcomm's latest flagship chip that's based on kind of ARM's A57, A53 combo template that I think that they've downgraded that to the 808 because it really is not a big deal, right? There's not a whole lot of performance loss that you'll see ever.
Nothing runs better than an 808 phone making. I'm on fire. This is a Friday morning pod. I feel good. Coffee break.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, so then what do you think of this phone just from what we know? Because Ian and I were spending some time in the office this week. Ian Hardy, godfather of the mobile syrup mafia, just looking at it and being like, hey, do we like this phone? Is it?
Question mark.
Is it obviously like it's microsec photos, so like very, very promo heavy, but just even like the color and I don't know. LG's always kind of been a boring phone maker in my mind. And this seems like them trying to not be boring a little bit.
Oh, that's a shot, right? Like, okay, so the whole idea with LG was that they went against the grain by putting their power and volume buttons on the back. they wanted to make their phone slimmer. This started with the G2 and has since spread to basically every phone that they offer.
No, I get that. I'm just saying, when it comes to like what platonic ideal of a phone, if you named like some of the major hardware manufacturers, I can conjure up an image of what their family of phones looks like in my head. LG and Sony, in my mind, are just like the exact same like generic phone box.
Interesting. And I mean, as somebody who kind of doesn't live in the phone world all day, every day, I can understand that. When I think of LG, I definitely have a distinct picture of their brand. The problem is that they don't appear to have a great handle on their marketing when it comes to their own brand, right?
Yes. Okay.
So,
and part of the disconnect when we were looking at the kind of the promotion of this on the microsite was like, is this what LG is trying to do? It's like you're not a girl, not yet a woman. You're kind of feeling out adulthood. They were just like reaching for like, hey, we're sexy, LG.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, there's one of the issues that I found with this is that there's it looks very similar to a lot of their other devices, but they're clearly trying to differentiate based on where the puck was, not where the puck is going. So, they're insisting that removable batteries are still important, that micro SD is still important, that these sort of major gimmicky software features are still very important, without getting to the core of the issue. And I think something that Samsung realized with the S6 was that they just need to make a really good, beautiful smartphone, and everything will follow suit. I mean, Samsung has an advantage, right? They've always been the front runner in the Android space, and LG's always been second tier when it comes to brand recognition. So they've tried to kind of leverage the sort of leftovers that Samsung has given them. So, okay, anybody who doesn't want a Samsung phone with a small battery that can't be replaced, they're going to go for the LG G4. I don't know if that's enough to push people towards this device, especially since it appears that other than the camera and the screen, they really haven't done a whole lot to tell me why I should want this device. And obviously it's not announced yet, and we don't know all the details, but just based on LG's track record for software, I don't have a lot of faith that the phone will live up to its own high expectations. I think the myriad, backing options, the fact that it's going to offer 5 different leather colors and a number of different matte plastic finishes, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Is that enough to sell the phone itself?
But that's lipstick on the phone, right? I think your point with them kind of being caught in the now rather than building the future is very interesting, because I think that leads to that kind of like generic Android phone sense I have of them, because it seems like they build for whatever the current audience of that vocal Android base is saying. It's like, we want removable batteries. We want this. This is micro SD slots. This is what Android is. Like we love this functionality. Whereas the phones that have started to be more successful are the ones that are kind of like pulling away from that and doing their own thing. And people forget about features the minute that the experience is nice enough for them to not need it, right? So I think they might win an audience by being like, the last remaining Android phone that does all these Android things that Android users said were really important to them for years. I do like the color options, but yeah, you're right. It's not like they're saying, this is what a phone should be in 2015. It's more like here's the prettiest version of our phone, which is the same.
What could be interesting is whether if they go, say, the Motorola route, is they release a phone significantly cheaper than the flagships and then start offering the accessories to build up the margin at a higher cost. So Motorola, for example, their Moto E, Moto G line, they sell basically at cost from the carrier or outright. You can buy it, $200, $150, $200, but then they make a lot of that margin back with $15, $20 accessories that cost them 10 cents to make. It appears that LG is sort of moving in that direction here by offering these customization options. Motorola did that quite effectively with the Moto Maker system, but it's unclear how LG is going to offer its different backings, whether you're going to be able to go to a TELUS or Rogers store and buy one off the shelf to, you know, augment your you know, daily feelings.
Yeah, because the benefits of the maker thing is that it's all being decided beforehand, whereas if you're doing it in store, there's a whole waddle of inventory problems. Although I do like what they're doing with like the backs and stuff. Like I like some of this, but I also think that a lot of that's superfluous to the phone itself. Yeah. And if you don't find the phone compelling, or actually to put it another way, if the phone marketing isn't on point to make you understand why this phone exists and why you should want it, then it becomes like the customization options and the additional accessories don't matter so much.
Yeah, and I think what LG kind of doesn't get yet is that people want the whole package. You can't just sell the phone on its superior screen or sharper camera. You can't sell the phone based on the fact that it has leather backing options. The great move that Samsung made with the S6 was the simplification of the message. The fact that it's just a beautifully made smartphone that you're going to enjoy using. And that's what the iPhone has been for so long. That's what Apple has found so much success with. The camera has always been good. The screens have always been good. The experience has always been good, but they don't necessarily, I mean, they do in some marketing material, like the shot with iPhone series that you see on bus billboards and stuff. But Apple has just been pushing the fact that it's a cohesive whole.
Yeah, but the shot with iPhone stuff just reinforces that notion that it's a really great phone, right? That like the beauty of the photo is associated with the power or the beauty of the device. But I think you're right. Like just that idea of the fallacy of choice. And I think part of it is because of the difficulties in being an Android manufacturer. You're competing with so many other OEMs and you're trying to find spots on the margin if you're not building the best phone in the world or even trying. But I think for a broad swath of the consumer base, they're just like, so what's the good phone? I would like a good phone, or like I'd like a cheap phone. And when it comes down into the weeds of like, I need super durable, I need 12x battery life, like that's you're thin slicing ever farther with those specific choices.
Yeah.
And you know,
I agree. I think, I mean, LG's probably going to make a fantastic device, but so did Sony, so did Motorola. You know, these are companies that struggle so much in the North American market to sell anything.
Yeah.
And it comes down to the fact that when you walk into a store, most people are overwhelmed with choice and they know two brands. They know Samsung and they know Apple, and they walk out with one or the other. And we talked in the last pod about the, you know, what a $350 iPhone 6 is going to do to the Android market. But I don't think it's going to benefit LG or Motorola or Sony. It's going to benefit Samsung directly. And you know, it's probably not a zero-sum game. I don't think all the potential iPhone sales are going to go towards Samsung, but I do think that the majority of people who are going to look at an iPhone 6 and balk at the price are either going to continue balking at it and still buy one, or just move to a Samsung and be like, okay, well, that's all I give a that's
because do they want to consider? Yeah, I think maybe us in the tech press, we kind of look at this stuff like the sales of devices are inextricably linked to the quality of the device, but a lot of it's just like awareness and marketing. And you know, even Motorola, what they're doing, they're trying to make a really great device or a really simple device. It's just their one caveat is it at X price point. So like, we'll not go beyond this and give you the best experience at this level. So yeah, I would, if someone's looking at an iPhone and they're like, yeah, I want an iPhone. I heard it's really good. It's really nice. And they're like, whoa, that's way too expensive. You know, are they going to just get a cheaper iPhone because they want the iPhone, or someone maybe puts the Samsung S6 in front of them? But are they going to be like, I should really consider these other brands that I've never really heard of?
Yeah, no, historically, people don't switch. I mean, realistically, if you're going to get an iPhone, you're going to get an iPhone because by now you're already entrenched in the iOS ecosystem. So they're not, I mean, there are some people who are going to go to a carrier store with the intention of upgrading to an iPhone and walk out with a Galaxy. But realistically, both from an internal struggle having, with the knowledge that they're going to have to set up their apps again and re-buy all of their favorite services or whatever, or they're going to have to kind of just suck it up and pay the extra money for the device, especially since $350 in the scheme of things is really not a lot of money when you're paying $2,000-$3,000 over the course of 2 years for your plan.
Well, I just people would be like, okay, so the 6 is too much. Have you seen the 5S? It comes in gold.
Right, but I know a lot of people that I've spoken to either want a $0 phone or they want the phone that they want. Right? There's not a big delta in between those things.
Yeah, it's that fallacy of choice. Like, and I think so. We're gonna get hammered in the comments probably by our listenership because they are the type of people, especially the Android users, who will kind of like, it's like they're like foodies or like people really into cheese. They're like, for my next phone, I think I'm looking for something a little smoky with some deep undertones, and cheddar is better. But for the majority of people, they just kind of want to they want experience. They're like, I need phone. I need good phone. Can you give me good phone? This one? Okay.
Yeah, and that's why the low end Motorola phones have been doing so well, because you go into a store and you say, I want a free phone. What free phone can you give me?
Yes.
And they go Moto G, period, full
Boom.
stop. Like no other option, because the carriers have they deal with all these crappy like $0 phone returns, right? They have to deal with the notion of people coming back and being like, I hate this phone. It's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
What else can you give me? Or like, I just want an iPhone. So, if for them, it's in their best interest to recommend high quality devices. And there aren't a lot of high quality $0 phones right now, except for, what's interesting is that a lot of the law of averages and time eventually leads to every phone being $0. So eventually, if you wait long enough, the high end devices like the Galaxy Alpha that you reviewed will go down to $0. And if you wait long enough, anything goes down to $0. So I'm looking on the Rogers site right now. The Galaxy S4 is $0. The LG G3 is $50, which is a pretty good deal. The Xperia Z1 is $0. So, the G3 Vigor is $0. So let's talk about that for a second, because you and I had the first VoLTE phone call using this crappy mid-range device.
This was very interesting. Yeah, well, it's difficult because like you literally were like, boxes of phones, let's do this. So it was the first time I had kind of even touched the phone. So separating the phone specific experience with this new fancy technology was interesting. But so, I thought it was very different, like noticeably different compared to just a standard phone call, but not necessarily worse or better. It's just kind of like the specifics of the experience changed.
Interesting. Yeah, you mentioned at the time that it felt less human. Like,
okay, so this is difficult to describe, right? Because it's all interpersonal. But I think when most people think of a standard phone call, there is a sense almost like that they're hearing someone through a tunnel. Like they can physically tell that there's someone, like you can kind of hear the line, you can hear the distance.
Yeah.
And then the quality of the connection and maybe where that person is affects that. So it sounds like if you're two people talking on a cell phone, it sounds like they're far away.
Right.
But you get a sense of with where they are from where they're calling. Oh, it's windy where you are. Oh, you really have the phone close to your mouth, like, or there's a lot of background noise. With this call, it was almost like you were inside my phone just talking, or it was just like digital audio. So that distance was all gone, and the entire experience was in my phone rather than me hearing you from your phone.
Right. And what I found so interesting about it was first, the quality was much higher. I mean,
Mhm.
just objectively, you had more bandwidth. Your voice was fuller. It was I could hear the subtleties in your words. There was no distance from your mouth to my ear, so it was basically like you were just talking in my ear, similar to the way that a Skype call works. And I mean, Skype, when it works, is a pretty decent experience.
Sure.
Skype to Skype.
Yeah.
And other voice over IP services work in a similar way. This was interesting because the notion of making a VoLTE phone call is eventually just going to be making a phone call. You open your phone dialer, you type in a number, and you connect. The difference between VoLTE and a regular 3G call is that it takes about 2 seconds to connect. So immediately, almost after I pressed the dial button, your phone received it, which is different than what it is today when there's a 6 to 7 second connection time, which is a fee essentially. You're paying a time fee, right? It's just you're waiting for the technology.
Yeah.
And you can also while you're making the call, during the phone call, you can actually switch to a video call on the fly. And that's kind of cool because it's native to the phone experience.
Yeah, and that's something that you would like. I hadn't really considered that. FaceTime and things like that just kind of go away once voice calling or video calling is ubiquitous across cellular networks, right?
Right.
So yeah, I thought it was, it sounded like you were just an MP3 playing from my phone. And that was different because it did sound like I didn't know what was going on with you. Like I couldn't get any information about where you were or like if you were outside or inside or anything. It was just your voice projecting from it. But I think that's, I guess that's an improvement. The lack of call lag is an improvement. The ability to immediately go to video call was kind of cool, although I was having problems with the phone switching it over. But I think that was the phone, like the touchscreen on the phone was not as responsive. I think the actual call experience was fine.
Yeah, and it's early days yet. So I've been in touch with the Rogers technical team, and they've explained to me a couple of things that I didn't know when I wrote about the piece. For example, when you make a phone call using a VoLTE-enabled device to a non-VoLTE-enabled device, your phone still stays on LTE. You're connecting through the IMS system that VoLTE is kind of leveraging. So it no longer has to drop down to 3G, even if your phone is connected through 3G on a phone call, which is really cool. Just the benefits of that call are no longer there, right? So you no longer have that high bandwidth, wideband voice call anymore.
Yeah, but you don't have to make any decisions or like, do I call via this or that? Which I think is smart.
Exactly.
And so when you called me on my personal phone, it just sounded like a phone call again, like a traditional phone call.
So it's a seamless experience for people, and eventually, when more and more devices have this feature, you won't even know. It'll just, if you have the ability to make a voice call, the button will show up there, and if you don't, then it won't. And this is something that's going to roll out over a couple of years, because right now it doesn't even seem like Rogers has a vested interest in upgrading its older devices to support VoLTE.
No, that's a headache, man.
It's a total headache, but it also relies on the OEM, right? So you have to reach out to Samsung and say, hey, we have 6 LTE or VoLTE enabled devices that we've already launched. Do you mind, turning on this tiny little feature? And they'll be like, well, it costs a lot of money to issue an upgrade, so why don't we just roll it into a future update? And that may take 8 months to a year to get that update out. So they're only releasing newer devices right now with VoLTE, which is sad but understandable. And right now, the only device to take advantage of it is like a really crappy mid-range LG device called the G3 Vigor, which is not a good phone, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of cool. It's a new technology. It's enabled in Canada. It's going to come soon to other carriers, blah, blah, blah. OnePlus.
Yeah.
Another OEM that's had some Canadian troubles. This is a company that made a lot of mobile Syrup readers very happy because they essentially brought out a Nexus 5 replacement at a time when the Nexus 5 was hard to find. This has been a really good device. It's still cheap, but they had to stop Canadian shipments because they had logistics problems with their supplier. So they re-enabled Canadian shipping on April 10th. You can now buy OnePlus One in Canadian dollars. It ships without duties or taxes, and it is going to arrive at your door in about half the time.
Yeah,
awesome.
So that's interesting. Like, so tying that back to the LG stuff, when you look at the types of people who are going to care about like Android from like a feature to feature, kind of like, I want exactly this phone experience. I want these things plus this thing, are probably way more inclined to just get a OnePlus One, order direct, which requires no marketing budget, right? Than to go into a store and buy this. So it seems like that kind of stuff, like on the low end or on the not premium amazing device, kind of Samsung level, what Motorola and like OnePlus do in terms of the phone offerings, it seems like way more smarter for the Android space. And you see the other companies in the mid-range, like HTC, Sony, LG, just struggling because they're not one of those things. They're just caught in the cycle of mediocrity.
It's unclear how many devices OnePlus has sold to Canadians, though. So we have to preface things by saying that the majority of Canadians still buy their phones from a carrier. And as ubiquitous as the OnePlus One is in Canada, I mean, I see a lot of them. It's not an overly popular phone. I mean, a phone.
No, but I'm saying, you know, at a time when you have other smartphone manufacturers who are trying to reach the broad populace, you know, suffering losses because of the budgets required to market to that. Whereas you have someone like OnePlus just coming in on like doing like referral things, and like everyone on the mobile Syrup site and forums and things like that just know who they are. It's like their operating cost for getting, you know, they might not be selling as much as an HTC, but their costs are way lower. Like they're directly profiting from this, right? So that I guess that was kind of my point there, where it's tough to be in the middle.
Yeah,
it's like the NBA. You want to be either really good or really bad.
Why would you want to be really bad in the NBA?
Because then you get draft picks.
Oh, you mean the team, not the player?
No, yeah, sorry. So okay. NBA playoffs start tomorrow, guys. So we the North, let's go Raptors. All that.
Do we have it? What is it?
What it is going to be Paul Pierce's funeral, because we're burying that corpse.
Whoa!
Hot takes.
He's already an old man. Don't kick him while he's down.
He's only like 6 years older than me too. Which is
he's old for the NBA.
Yes, NBA old.
So yeah, I agree with you. I just think that, you know, OnePlus has done, as cheeky as some of their marketing tactics have been, they've done a good job appealing to a very shrewd audience of smartphone users who are looking for the best deal or the best return on investment. And there's no argument that your purchase of a OnePlus One is a great return on investment. You know, it's almost a year old now. It's done really, really well. And breaking, Apple Pay plans to launch in Canada this fall. Wall Street Journal. Sorry, I just saw that right now. So yeah, I think that they've done a really good job marketing themselves. They've done a good job upgrading the device. I think CM12 is a pretty good update, and as long as people had to wait, they're going to be happy with it. It's still a great device overall, and it proves that you don't need the latest specs to be a happy smartphone user. Well,
yeah. So we were talking on the pod last week about that kind of like, you know, the end of Future Shop, and really the end of kind of the big box retail when people can really buy what they want direct. Like I think the success of the OnePlus One is like an example of that kind of like tech purchasing from a phone perspective, where like the people who really care about that stuff can just go get that.
Cutting out the middleman.
Exactly. Yeah, and they don't need like Robert Downey Jr. in a commercial to like convince them that they should buy a different phone from the one that they actually want, right? I think it's smart.
It's interesting you mentioned that because Robert Downey Jr. represents HTC, and they paid him a lot of money. And today, April 17th, is when the One M9 comes out. And that's an example of a company that's doing so many great things product-wise, but from a marketing perspective, they just don't have the momentum that they need, and they don't have the budget they need, and therefore they can't get the momentum they need to appeal to the wide audience that, say, a OnePlus would. And even though HTC is a much more well-known brand, obviously, than OnePlus, they are stuck in that purgatory where they're overshadowed by so many other Android OEMs that are doing the same thing better. And in the low end, they're being squeezed by companies like OnePlus and Xiaomi, that have these broad, Chinese-based. OnePlus is a sort of a weird anomaly because most of their sales have been in North America, but their parent company Oppo is one of those disruptors that seem to be making waves in China and the greater Asia area by undercutting a lot of the incumbents like Samsung.
Totally.
And they're doing a great job at it.
Yeah, so the phone's out. I think we've talked about it before.
Which phone? The OnePlus, the One M9?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great phone. I think, if you're
is
stuck.
It a great phone, or is it a very good phone?
You know what? I've played with it a lot, and I've gotten, since the pod last time, I got a North American version, so none of the battery problems that I had with the international version are there. I can use it on LTE in Canada everywhere because the last one only had band 7, which only worked on Rogers and Bell, and it didn't work in all parts of Toronto. It's a great phone. I will say it's a great phone, and you should definitely consider it. It's got better battery life than the S6, but it doesn't have as wide a feature set as the S6. So, its battery is basically the only thing that is demonstrably better than the S6. Everything else kind of is almost as good or much worse. So, almost as good is the screen. It's got a great screen, but it's not as good as the S6. The software is whatever. I mean, you can basically make Android whatever you want. So if you install a custom launcher on the S6, you can forget about most of TouchWiz's problems. You can charge it in better ways. The S6 you can charge wirelessly, which is awesome. And the camera, it's really what it comes down to for me is that the S6 just has a far better camera than the M9.
Yeah. And so it's very good or great, but not the best.
Correct.
It's a tough place to be in. And it's also, god damn, is that thing heavy?
Really?
It just feels like, compared to other phones, like it just feels like, or it's just like the density of that thing, like that is just a block of metal. It is a thick, it kind of reminds me of like, so it's very similar to the One M8 in the overall aesthetic and design, and but it almost seems like that kind of thing where back in the console days, Sega was like, you like the Genesis? How about we just stuff the Genesis with more stuff? 32X, Sega CD. And like, they didn't make a new thing so much as just like cram the old thing with stuff. And the One M9 feels that way to me. Like it's it feels like the hyped up version of last year's phone rather than a new phone.
Absolutely is. It's very much an old phone that's been slightly updated to today's specifications.
It's like it's Street Fighter II Championship Turbo Edition.
But is that a bad thing, really? I mean, Street Fighter II Championship Turbo Edition was a great game, right? Like it's basically a distilling of everything that made the M8 great and the M7 great, right? They have gone through, they went through a checklist, and isn't that what a smartphone is today? The maturity of the smartphone industry necessitates the fact that there are no more broad strokes. It's all about refinement. Yeah,
but it's not a checklist though, right? It's about the overall. And so if that phone exists in a vacuum, sure, that's a fine phone. But you just laid out the reasons why you would take another phone because it didn't live up to the best phone on the market, right? So if there's not other experience,
those are my needs, right? Like my need for a better camera overshadows anything else, right? So I'll take a phone with a better camera because it has a better camera.
Yeah, but the broad phone buying market has sided with you on that.
No, the broad phone buying market has sided with the fact that Samsung has a much bigger budget for most things. I mean, when it comes down to it, most of the criticisms of the One M9 are extremely minor, and anybody who buys one, or the G4, or the Xperia Z3, or the Moto X, I mean, they'll all have a great experience. It's a problem where it's more of a marketing and availability problem than a quality problem, because everything is high quality these days. And I'm surrounded by really high quality smartphones, and I often go, well, you know, this is where we're suffering from an abundance of good choices, right?
No, we're not suffering. The companies selling these phones are suffering. We're doing fine. We have the choice is good for us. But so I think you're saying when it's quality or quality versus marketing, and it's just the phone in some way needs to stand out, and it needs to stand out because it's amazing. It needs to stand out because the brand and the marketing makes it everywhere. So it's the first thing you think about when you think about buying one of these things. Or it needs to be at the low end, like, this is a great phone for this price point. You know, this is the best version of a phone if you're only willing to spend this amount of money. And HTC doesn't check off any of those things. Its Venn diagram is kind of in between all of these ideas, but doesn't overlap. And it's just kind of there.
Yeah. I mean, that's the Android market in general, though. It's not limited to HTC.
That is very true.
You have all of these companies that cross over parts of the Venn diagram, and so many of them are good for some things, but at the end of the day, it's just easier. And that's why curation is so important in today's tech age, because there's so much choice. People just want to be told what to buy and what's the best. So, you know, that's why we do smartphone reviews and we do recommendations and things like that, because it's hard to make these decisions and everybody has their biases. So the one thing about Apple is that people are very loyal to Apple, but what we found and what HTC has admitted is that people aren't loyal to HTC, right? They'll be fickle about HTC phones because there's no loyalty to a brand. And similar to Samsung, similar to LG and Motorola, it's very easy to divest yourself of any loyalty to an Android manufacturer because they're so similar.
Yeah, and then also because you're still staying in Android, right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's another thing, is that how much of Android is Google and how much of Samsung's Android is Samsung, right? You know, what are the benefits of Android to the majority of its user base?
I always side on the platform. It's tough. It's tough building basically the components of someone else's offering. But so then maybe we should get people in the comments, because I'm sure we're just spitting, you know, moderate and, you know, insightful fire at these Android phones which we think are very good. But like, tell us why the One M9 is a phone for you, or even talk to us about, leave a comment about what is your criteria, or what is your thought process when you look at like a new portfolio of Android phones, you know, how you approach it, like what the first thing is, like camera, price, you know, the checkbox features, if it comes in like a weird champagne gold color, things like that.
Speaking of which, I want the green S6 to come to Canada so bad. I will buy that so fast. Just bring it, Samsung. I don't care. Yeah. Just do it.
So you can put it in a giant case.
I'll never put my S6 in a case. It's too nice. It's too pretty. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, we live in this bubble, and we say this every week. We live in this bubble. We don't buy phones the same way that regular people buy phones because that's just our job. So yeah, tell us how you buy your phone today. I mean, do you do the research beforehand? Do you go into a carrier store and look at them and compare and contrast? I mean, these are important things because we're completely, sort of veiled by this whole process these days. And we probably should spend more time pretending that we know nothing about smartphones and just going into carrier stores and having people sell us on
man,
things.
that's so terrible. We can't escape our genius. It's not our fault. There's nothing we can do about that. But we do know people who are sales reps at these stores, and the reasons, maybe we should do like a Phone Sellers Anonymous and get a few of the actual store people who are on the ground being like, do you want this one or this one, to say like what they really look for and what they do, what they get asked when they're selling phones. Well, from across the carriers. Yeah. That'd be an interesting little piece.
So, I mean, moving on from that, we have the S6. It's available. It's been available for a week. Apparently, it is selling so well that Samsung can't keep up with demand, and especially with the Edge. The Edge has been way more successful than Samsung thought, according to analysts. It's accounting for 50% of sales in some regions, where Samsung totally thought it would be in the 20 to 30% range. So they can't keep up with demand for that, especially. We've found, just from my cursory questions to people who have attempted to buy the S6, most carrier stores don't have the 64 and 128 SKUs. They only have the 32 meg SKUs. Sorry, 32 gig SKUs. And I guess over time that will get easier to find. But I mean, it's interesting that this is the first time Samsung has gone the Apple route and offered 6 SKUs for a device, right? Yeah. They have 32, 64, and 128 for both the S6 and S6 Edge.
But did we post a story earlier this week about the profit margins on the Edge being like way worse than the S6? So this really sucks for Samsung.
No, I mean, their profit margins are still quite high. It's the most expensive smartphone to manufacture in the world right now, though. It costs Samsung about $300 US to build each S6 Edge. So they're making good margins on it, depending on what they're selling it to carriers for. The problem is that there's no unlocked market in Canada, right? You can't buy a Samsung phone from Samsung the way that you can buy an iPhone from Apple or an Xperia from Sony or a Nexus from Google. There's just no unlocked Samsung smartphone market because they feel like the carrier model is just way more profitable for them.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe, let's start a campaign. Let's appeal to Samsung and bring the unlocked phones to Canada. Just do it.
I'm sure that they would love to do that eventually once, they've fought for those carrier relationships, which is why their phones get pushed over some other Android phones, right? Especially as the counter flagship to Apple. But I'm sure Samsung would love to be in a situation where they sold so many phones that they could just sell direct.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Well, I'm sure they could today. It's just they don't want to harm any of those relationships, as you said.
Well, it'd be interesting if they didn't have the backing of the carriers. Would they just become one of those hard to stand out, forgotten Android players, or do people have loyalty to Samsung?
I think people do. I think people are loyal to what they know, and if you've been invested in Samsung unless you've had a bad experience, and the thing that they're trying to counter that with the S6 is those Android users who have had bad experiences and then left to go iPhone, right? They want to bring
an Xperia, an experience. But yeah, so in terms of Android loyalty, I'd say like tier 1, Nexus, people ride or die Nexus, and then Samsung would be close second, and then I don't think anybody's third, or it's just the field.
Yeah, Nexus is interesting. Nexus is a very, very small population compared to Samsung, but a very fiercely loyal one.
Yeah. Shoutouts, Jane.
What up, yo? How's Portland? We miss you.
She's just wearing flannel all the damn time.
Apparently it's too hot. Can't wear flannel in like 25-degree weather.
God, Portland.
Oh man. So speaking of loyalty, Bell. let's talk a little bit about Bell.
That was a segue. That was a great segue.
Thanks, buddy. They've had a couple months of really, really tough PR. They have had some really terrible things happen to them of their own choosing. Don't get me wrong. They did this to themselves. But so first of all, Kevin Krull, the former head of Bell Media, has resigned after admitting to meddling in coverage of the CRTC Let's Talk TV hearings in February and March. Mm-hmm. And he called CTV's head of news and said, please do not put the commissioner of the CRTC commissioner's face on the news, because they want to move the story away from him and more towards the news itself and the decisions.
So just journalism hot takes right now for our listeners. That's a bad thing to do. That is called a conflict of interest.
That is also called, you're basically putting yourself in the line of fire against against Canada's media regulator.
Yeah.
Right. You're directly meddling in an area where you should not be going anywhere near. And he admitted that after the fact, and he got he apologized, and it was a very convoluted apology. But ultimately, the damage was done, and this wasn't the first time that he'd reportedly done that, because when Verizon was sniffing around Canada in 2013, he also apparently called up a bunch of newspapers and television channels and said that they can't report about the Verizon thing, or they had to change their reporting of the Verizon thing because they didn't want to portray Bell in a negative light or as vulnerable.
Or just portray Verizon as a potential, like a real thing that could happen, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people now, in retrospect, don't really think it was as close as it was, and Verizon has gone on the record to say that they were never really that interested. But from what we've heard,
I didn't want to date her anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Canada. From what we've heard through the grapevine, there was serious interest in acquiring either Wind or Mobilicity or both, but it didn't happen. So anyway, Kevin Krull's out. Not only that, but Bell shut down its relevant ad program after an investigation by the Privacy Commissioner's Office that said that it was violating its customers' privacy. And because it didn't ask users to opt in, it was an opt-out clause, which meant that automatically anybody on the wireless or internet streams was having their browsing tracked and that data sold anonymously, apparently anonymously, to third-party advertisers to more directly target those ads to you. So, for example, you shop for shoes a lot, and Bell would then sell your browsing data to these third-party advertisers, who would then give you more targeted shoe ads, which you would be more likely to click on. That's fine. Google does that all the time, but the problem is that you're already paying Bell a service, and on top of that, Bell didn't ask you whether you wanted to do that. They didn't ask your permission. So now they have reportedly closed that program. They have deleted the offending data. But today, Bell was hit with a $750 million class action lawsuit by a Windsor-based law firm that allows anybody who was a Bell customer between November 2013 and April 2015 to apply for some, I guess, winnings from this lawsuit. So if it goes through, it hasn't gone through yet, but
you just know it's going to happen, though. Like, it's
I mean, it'll happen because they screwed up, and they allege that it actually went against the Telecommunications Act. So we'll have to do a bit of digging into this. It just happened this morning. But
sorry, what do you mean who alleged?
A law firm alleged that Bell broke the law by doing this, because they were unlawfully tracking their customers' usage. And as part of the Telecommunications Act, ISPs are not allowed to are not allowed to track user data or track user browsing without their permission.
Yeah, just our government.
Yeah. Touche.
Yeah, so not the best, not the
best few months for Bell.
Yeah.
However, Bell has said that they've done some really interesting things network-wise. So they've launched LTE Advanced. They have Crave TV that's doing really well. They've turned around some of their poor showings in their earnings reports, so they're making money.
Whole new slew of executive appointments.
They're attracting customers. So on the day that Krull was outed, they actually made a bunch of changes to their executive team. Marianne Turk, the former head of media sales for Bell Media, is now the president of Bell Media. Wade Osterman, the former president of Bell Mobility, is now the president of BCE, the umbrella company that governs all of these disparate parts. And earlier this week, the 2500 megahertz spectrum auction began. So this is an interesting turn of events. Not really because it's going to have a great impact on the way that our wireless networks work, but it's great for potential rural internet service providers. So 2500 megahertz is a wideband spectrum, which means that it can carry a lot of data, but it can't really go that far. So it's a higher spectrum. It has the capabilities to carry a lot of LTE bandwidth over a smaller distance. So it's going to be used for fixed wireless in rural areas, which means that you have a modem in your house and with an antenna on the outside, and a tower will then beam the data into your home and basically power your home's wireless using LTE rather than, say, copper from satellite, which is much more expensive. And in areas that don't have any wired infrastructure, this is a huge benefit. So companies like SaskTel and MTS are experimenting with fixed LTE, and they have a bunch of rollouts in areas that have no cable or DSL service. And yeah, that's really what this is good for. There is a wireless element to this because Rogers and Bell currently support band 7 LTE. They've rolled it out to most of their major cities, and it's an auxiliary band, so it's not really meant for usage everywhere, but it's meant for usage where the signal is strong enough that they can access, that your phone can access it. So anywhere like an urban area, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, they will have this band 7 support, and it's got a lot of bandwidth, so it's very fast. This is that was the first network band in Canada that supported 150 megabits. So Rogers called it LTE Max for a while, but they then changed their branding.
Does that band perform better in urban areas because it's wider and there's less interference? Like, can it deal better in urban areas?
No, so actually, it doesn't deal in urban areas particularly well because there's a lot of interference and multipath. That's what wireless interference is called, multipath. But the way it works is that when it does have a signal and you're closer to the tower than you would be with, say, a 700 megahertz band, you actually get faster speeds. So it's easier for you to lose that signal. But if you're in an open space and you're close enough to the tower and there's no interference, you're in and basically if you're in an area that can directly see the tower, you'll get that band. If you go into a basement, if you go into a building, you'll probably get either 700 or AWS. So there's three frequencies that Canadian networks now use to offer LTE. So this spectrum auction, because Bell and Rogers already have more than is allowed by the CRTC, they're not going to be forced to divest any of that. They can't. They're not going to be forced to sell it off, but they can't bid for any new ones. So TELUS is basically going to take the spectrum auction as well as Wind. So Wind's going to have some more spectrum at the end of this, and we'll probably report that next week after the auction results are public, which is great because it's more spectrum for wireless carriers to use.
Shout out Saskatchewan and Manitoba.
What up, SaskTel? Rogers rolled out Wi-Fi at the Rogers Center. Beef or bust?
So this is interesting for two levels. First of all, it's like this beginning of, mobile overtaking our lives, in a sense that we can't go to a sporting event without needing to be connected or staring at our screen the whole way. But we were talking earlier this week, yesterday, the day before, about the new Sportsnet app, which has been relaunched, looks very, very good. And it was brought to our attention that maybe with this Wi-Fi rollout, there will be a tied-in promotion to the Sportsnet app, which is one of those vertical integrations that can be very, very profitable, and doesn't look good for competing sports apps.
Well, Rogers is taking advantage of the fact that they own the whole stack, and they've continued to do that. They rolled out a new version of Roam Like Home this week, and they're offering it only to Share Everything customers. They're continuing to do that. Fido rolled out its new plans last week and is offering Vice content exclusively because they can.
Shout out to Igor getting on that Vice content.
Yeah, they are. Oh yeah, he had a great story on one of the Toronto startup that's making really cool and advanced drugs for patients that would normally cost a lot more. So I think it's for cancer patients.
Yeah, I didn't understand it at all. It was way over my head.
Yeah, but shout out Igor for doing a great job on that.
But yeah, so good kind of integration, being able to promote your sports network's mobile app at a sporting event. Bad kind, telling the media not to report on things.
Well, so I mean, free Wi-Fi is great, right? But ideally, you should be able to use your phone in the Rogers Center. So a lot of what they're doing is they're trying to offload some of that extra bandwidth to Wi-Fi, which is fantastic in theory, but they should just be using small cells to increase the coverage density of the Rogers Center itself. I mean, we have the same problem in the Air Canada Center. We have the same problem during like the Santa Claus parade. When everybody in Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver or one of those big cities is condensed into a small area, the networks just can't support it. They just can't. They can't.
There's only so much you can do, right? Because like in the NBA, Mark Cuban, owner of the Dallas Mavs and communications mogul back in the day, has spoken at length about investigating the technology required to have a great kind of like connected experience at Dallas Mavericks games. And he's just the density of the connection requests makes it very difficult to unfeasible to provide, a service that is reliable or exceptional. So when you tie that to the investment costs to just deal with when you have 20,000 people in one spot, it's really hard to get a signal.
You're absolutely right. But that's what small cells were designed for. They can be deployed nimbly in smaller areas. They don't put out nearly as much. The infrastructure isn't nearly as difficult to implement. So they're cheaper to deploy. They only really service a few hundred or a few thousand people, but they fill in the gaps where towers can't hit, right? Because I don't know what the setup is like at the Rogers Center, but it's a clear example of sort of this wireless mesh, like where a mesh network would really benefit, and they just can't do that with the same nimbleness as if they had a small cell rollout. So small cells, I think, are the key here. I don't know if that's something that they're going to do, but it's probably just cheaper for them to go with Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
and then I don't know if it goes away when the dome opens. Just because the
Who
wire.
knows? Who knows? Yeah. Okay. So what's I mean, I haven't been to a Jays game yet this year, but hopefully we'll be able to test it out
Well, the home
when we
opener was
go.
just this week. Apparently, they're young and feisty, but still not winning more than they're losing. So hey,
4-5, right?
another year of baseball. Yeah, but I think there's a lot of Jays fans that are more excited about these guys because they're young, so the expectations aren't there, and
Oh, they're 5-5. Sorry.
I don't know. I baseball died for me the day Kelly Gruber got traded. So
I admit not to know a lot about baseball, so much to the chagrin of my friends, I'm a basketball guy. All right. So, lastly, I got to try the Apple Watch at the Apple Store on the 10th when pre-orders opened. I got to try the way that any customer would be able to book an appointment, go to a store, try it on, choose the band, choose the model that they want. It's a really, really interesting experience, largely because we've now found out that you won't be able to buy an Apple Watch in an Apple Store until June.
yeah,
So a lot of this is all just about education, right?
it's literal showrooming.
Yeah, it's about proving that the Apple Watch has a purpose, and you can go in, you can see the demo loop, you can try on different bands, different sizes, see what's right for you, and then go home and order one. Which this sort of asynchronousness is interesting because on the one hand, a lot of people who wanted one have already pre-ordered it and will then book the appointment to go in and try one on, and then maybe just cancel their order if they find a different one that they want. But this is more for the future. This is more for people who don't really know what they want, if they want to just try it on at all.
Yeah, for non-early adopters, I would think it's that education phase of the broad populace to be like, oh yeah, maybe for Christmas, maybe I don't know, maybe we want this, maybe we want an Apple Watch, like just and it leverages that strength of like Apple's retail, which is like become the anchor store of many a mall in Canada and across the world, to just they have so much foot traffic going into those stores all the time. It's a great way for them to just slowly indoctrinate people into the idea that having a multi-$100 watch on their wrist is something that they need. Little Sally and little Timmy need their smartwatches for Christmas.
Well, I mean, the $450 Apple Watch Sport, my guess, is going to be one of the most popular Christmas presents of 2015 by far.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where it's a single thing. It's expensive, so it's like a special gift.
Yeah.
But it needs an iPhone, so a lot of people can justify it because they've already purchased an iPhone. And it's going to be one of those things where, okay, well, I don't want to, let's team up and buy it for somebody's birthday or somebody's Christmas present, right? Like it's a very tangible gift that people are going to.
Much more personal, yeah.
It is. It's also, I mean, that's true too. Like, if you can customize it to suit individuals' desires, right? So anybody who's dismissing the Apple Watch because they think it's too expensive really, really needs to take a look at the watch market in general. And if anybody would have bought a watch or received a watch as a present, those watches are usually in the $400 to thousands of dollar ranges anyway.
Well, it's easier. So, it's also easier to buy kind of a watch as a gift than a phone as a gift, just because of the way the purchasing goes.
Yeah.
Like you don't like. There's no carrier you need. Like I couldn't just like buy you unless I wanted to buy it unlocked. Depending on if there's like an unlocked market, I can't just buy you a phone for Christmas. I might be signing you up with a contract or doing that. Whereas this, I can just go Apple Store, watch, and make sure you get the band that you like in that color that you feel is attractive. But you can pretty much book that Business Insider article January of 2016 about how dominant Apple's Christmas was with the Apple Watch.
Yeah, yeah. It's and by then inventory will be full, and there'll be lots of and the other thing that we shouldn't count out is that the third party accessory industry is going to go nuts over this, right? They've already gone nuts over it, but they're going to go crazy over different third party bands, charging stations, battery packs, everything that one would expect for an iPhone.
Yep.
This is just going to the same frenzy is going to happen with the Apple Watch.
It's gonna be bananas. Also, the native apps by then?
Yeah, they were talking about it by November, so I think native apps are going to happen.
Yeah, you could just see the native app Christmas commercial of like the wonders of your watch, like
it's true.
A daughter making a song for her grandma on her watch or something, and then everyone cries.
That's beautiful. Okay, so I think we've sort of gone through the major stuff.
We made it.
The last 10 days. I just want to say City Mapper, one of my favorite transit apps that I use all the time in the States, is finally in Canada. So if you're in Toronto, Vancouver, or Montreal, try this app. Let me know how you like it. It's fantastic. I like Transit app and I will continue using Transit app, but City Mapper is a good competitor, and it's a really, really great company. So let us know how you like it. Let us know how you buy your phones. Let us know what you thought. Let us know what you ate for breakfast this morning. Just let us know something. We love you guys.
Tell us you love us.
Tell us that you love us. Don't tell us you hate us. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back next week with another SyrupCast, and we will hopefully have a special guest for you. I will talk to you next week. Thanks, everybody.